Found your letter in the attic, dust old and warm. Talk of legends, knights and battles torn in golden fields where Arcadia's born. Friendship forged in words we'd sworn. Under trees where shadows tell tales of heroes dark and dwell. Poems whispered under breath in the light of life and death. Author, our souls combine in stories, dreams, and a wandering mind. From fields of gold to the myths we find in letters shared through the sands of time. We rode on steeds of purest thought in quest for truths unseen, unsought. Magic realms where fate is caught in tales of love, the battles fought. Reflections dark in moonlit stream of days long past like fading dreams. In every page the truth redeems, woven tight by memory seams. Author, skies align in realms of green where heroes shine. Your letters bring a trace of divine in the tapestry of heart and mind. Author, our souls combine in stories, dreams, and a wandering mind. From fields of gold to the myths we find in letters shared through the sands of time.
Good morning, I am Jeff, and this is my read on C.S. Lewis, where I learn about him through everything that he wrote in the order in which he wrote it. I am currently down the path of looking at the first adventure story, the romantic adventure that he wrote about a knight named Bleheris. It's a work that he never published. He was working on it in his late teens while he was preparing for his entrance exams into Oxford University, and also while he was planning for his conscription into the army to go fight in World War I. So he never finished it, although he did share his manuscript of it with his best friend Arthur Greaves, and he would mail him installments of the story. So we've been reading so far. We've read all the way up to chapter 9, and so chapter 9 is where we'll start today. The background is this is a story about a knight named Bleheris who lives in a time and in a kingdom where they somewhat remember the great deeds and stories of knights like King Arthur and his court, but not many of those deeds have been performed of late. Bleheris is betrothed to the woman that he loves and adores, a lady named Alice. They call her Saint Alice because she's so virtuous. And let's see, once he finds out that his marriage to her has been arranged, he feels unworthy because he hasn't completed any knightly deeds, nothing worthy of him receiving such a prize as Alice as his wife. So I'll just pick up where we left off. He's come across this hostel, this inn, basically, where there are three strange characters there. There's a short little guy, very effeminate looking. There's a tall and skinny guy. And then there's a guy in the middle who seems to kind of be the leader of all of them. Bleheris has decided to go on a quest to defeat some shadowy character, someone that he doesn't know a whole lot about, named Striver. And on his way on this journey, he has the chance to show how brave he is by moving forward into kind of this sunken, dark, scary forest, and he runs away whenever something tiny like jumps out of the bushes. And that leads him to this hostel where he meets these three characters. So here's where he starts talking to all three of them. I'll pick it up there. Chapter 9, How Bleheris Hearkened to Juan Jadis. Juan Jadis is the short guy of the three. Aye, even so, to draw men unto him, as a spider snares the flies in his net, answered the tall man hotly. And then turning him on to Bleheris, I charge thee, young sir, said he, keep a guard on thyself, when this one speaks to thee, for his words be passing cunning to steal away a man's reason. And if once he taketh and brighteth thee unto the striver, then the gods help thee, say I. So the middle man, who seems to be a little bit of the leader, has actually already identified himself in the last chapter as the servant of this striver character that Bleheris thinks that he's going on his quest to defeat. And so this middle character, his name is Hyperides, I believe is how you pronounce it. And he says, oh, I am the servant of the one that you seek. And it's my job to do his will and to draw men unto him. This figure, by the way, this striver, was referred to in the earlier story by, or he was kind of described earlier in the story by Bleheris's would-be father-in-law, a king and a former knight. He was described as, he claimed, some people say that actually he's not a villain at all, but he's almost like a god, almost like I can't remember what kind of figure, but basically a god. And so it's interesting that his servant now here maybe kind of confirms that by saying, I'm a servant of Striver and I do his will and I draw men unto him. So anyway, at the opening of this chapter, the tall, skinny guy that's next to this Striver's servant is the one says, yeah, to draw men unto him like a spider snares the flies in his net. And then he warns Bleheris, I charge thee, young sir, keep a guard on thyself when this one speaks to you. For his words be passing cunning to steal away a man's reason. And if once he taketh and bringeth thee unto the striver, then the gods help thee, I say. The gods, said poor Bleheris, crossing himself. There is but one. Aye, the gods, shouted the other, smiting upon the table and speaking as to a troublous child. What boots it to quarrel which of these old tales be the greater learning? For when thou art fallen among sorcerers and deceivers, all the gods shall have little help to give thee. Then Hyperides looked upon the desirous so calmly, and withal so little moved by his bitter words, that Bleheris wondered. But the golden-bearded one spake and said, Fair cousin, thou dost utter many revilings upon me and upon my master. Yet do I bear these the more lightly, because I know thou canst not choose but love thy friend. In truth also I am grieved for thy sake, because of thy seeking after tomorrow. For I fear lest thou be spilled upon the rock, mothlight, that hath done to die so many who went that quest. Let be, growled the other, though somewhat softened by Hyperides' words. I must even take my chance for the glory that is beyond. And hereat there came into his eyes a look as of a seer who sees wonders in a trance. But as to this youngling, hath thy striver set his mark on him? Nay, I know not, answered he, looking upon Bleheris. For until I met with thee, and with Juan Jadis, even now, I wist naught of him. But then the power began to draw me hither, towards the hostel, and to give me knowledge who he was. Yet verily I think the only virtue of the lad is this, that he desired the striver in his own heart, wherefore someday he may be worthy to come to him. Said I not well that thou art a sorcerer? said Gersi the Desirous. Gersi the Desirous is the tiny little short one, the effeminate looking one. And then the tall, scrawny one, they just said his name, but I missed it. Desirous. It says, no. Yeah, I think that's his name. I can't remember. Doesn't matter. Yeah. Gersi the Desirous. There we go. Sorry, Gersi the Desirous is the tall, skinny one. The short one is Juan Jadis. All right. Said I not well that thou art a sorcerer, said Gersi the Desirous, yet will I not meddle in the matter. And when he had thus spoken, he leaned back where he sate and fell into a study with his eyes fixed moodily upon the fire. Thereafter, for a short time, all held their peace until Juan Jadis returned him towards Bleheris and spake unto him. Now, the change from the Desirous unto that sweet and comely youth was as honey after wormwood, or spring after winter. Although in truth there was more of the sad loneliness of autumn than the lustiness of spring in him. So this note right here reminds me of nothing that has anything to do with the story, but just a scene from my life. He says, now the change from the Desirous unto that sweet and comely youth was honey after wormwood, or spring after winter. Although in truth there was more of the sad loneliness of autumn than the lustiness of spring in him. Just that change in mood, that change in countenance is something that reminds me of an experience I had one time at the border in Canada, where a border agent was not going to let me into the country, was peppering me with questions. I was going there for work or for business. It was a business meeting. Our sister company had an office there. Anyway, he wasn't going to let me in, and he was peppering me with questions, and he had like fire in his eyes and of course a gun on his hip, and he was very intimidating. And once I had said what it was that he needed to hear to lead him to believe that I was coming into the country under not false pretenses, that I actually did need to be there, and he had decided he was going to let me in, his entire mood just like completely changed. And so that's what this reminded me of. He just became very polite, very helpful. He turned very Canadian. And before he was going to let me in, he seemed more American than Canadian. All right, that's neither here nor there. And in all his speech and countenance, there was such a sorrowfulness, such a delicate and girlish beauty. This was not in the Canadian border agent at that point. Yet with manly courage and bold good fellowship, that Bleheris was nigh ravished to hear him. Fair sir, said Jadis, I pray thee, is it truth then, what our good friend Hyperides saith, that thou dost ride on the quest of him that strives? Truly, sir, said Bleheris, somewhat in doubt, I know not. For though it be sooth that I rode forth to seek him, yet, when I did thus, I deemed that he was some saint or great hero, by whom I might win my manhood. Yet now have these two so spoken of him that I fear lest he be some evil thing, some snare for the frailty of us men, which are but dust, and the children of iniquity. For all this holy lore had my good Bleheris learned from Father Ulfin. And moreover, though I be loth, I cannot say that the matter whereby this stranger knew of my dealings savoureth somewhat of magic and evil acts. And therewith he looked upon the golden bearded, as one who will not pluck a quarrel, but would fain hear some defence. By Hyperides seeing him so look, answered, My son, I said to thee but a little time since, that it was my task to draw men unto striver, yet therein I erred, for no man can draw another on that road, but only shew it to him if he seeketh after it. Man, there's a lot of theology baked in here. And, Lewis considers himself an atheist, but I feel like what he's describing here about how Striver works and how the character is describing Striver is a lot like how the God of Christianity and the God of the Hebrews further back draws people to him. So I just find that interesting. Therefore, thou must needs go on what quest thy heart bids thee, nor can I let thee from it. though it lead thee to Mothlight. Yeah, I mean, he's saying, yeah, I erred earlier. I was saying it's my job to draw people to Striver, but no man can draw another to him, but only show him that road if he seeks after it. Interesting. All right. Then as Bleheris pondered a little on that saying, one Jadis spoke again and said, "Noble youth, I'll be..." You know what? I'm going to bring Robot Lady in here because I want to read her this section. Hey, Robot Lady. How are you doing?
Hey there. I'm doing great. Ready for our next adventure. How about you?
I'm already in it. I've actually started without you. I apologize for bringing you in late, but I wanted to read a particular passage to you and get your take on it. I'll share my opinion and something that I'm seeing in it. I just want to see what you think. Does that sound okay?
That sounds perfect. I'm ready whenever you are.
Okay, so in this section, Bleheris is talking to these three characters that he's met on his adventure. One of them is short and kind of effeminate looking. The other one is tall and skinny. These are three men. And then there's a guy kind of who's in the middle. He's got a golden beard, and he claims to be the servant of this character called Striver, who Bleheris is questing after to gain his manhood or gain his honor, either by, fighting him or defeating him in battle or receiving some kind of reward from him. He doesn't exactly know who this Striver character is. So that's kind of what I'm about to read about.
Got it. I'm curious to hear how this conversation unfolds. Go ahead and share when you're ready.
Okay. And the middle character claims to be a servant of Striver. And he told Bleheris just a little bit earlier that it's his job to draw men to Striver. So Bleheris is then asked, is it true what our good friend, the middle friend who draws people to Striver, his name is Hyperides, the short guy who's kind of effeminate looking, he says to Bleheris, he says, "Fair sir," this character's name is Jadis, the short effeminate guy, he says, "I pray thee, is it true then what our good friend Hyperides saith, that thou dost ride on the quest to reach Striver," or the way that he says it is, to ride on the quest of him that strives? And then Bleheris responds, "Truly, sir," somewhat in doubt, "I know not, for though it be sooth that I rode forth to seek him, yet when I did thus, I deemed that he was some saint or great hero by whom I might win to my manhood."
That's an interesting interaction. It sounds like Bleheris is caught in a mix of uncertainty and the pull of different perspectives, with Hyperides trying to guide him towards Striver. The way Jade steps in to question Bleheris adds to the complexity of the moment. It feels like Bleheris is wrestling with the idea of what it truly means to win, not just in battle, but in terms of honor or self-discovery. Hyperides seems to embody a certain kind of guide, and Bleheris' response shows he's still figuring out his path.
Yeah, thanks. I'm going to continue with what Bleheris is saying here, because here's the point that I want to get to. He says, "Yet now have these two so spoken of him that I fear lest he be some evil thing, some snare for the frailty of us men, which are but dust, and the children of iniquity. For all this holy lore had my good Bleheris learned from Father Ulfin." The narrator jumps in here. And one thing that the tall, skinny guy said, guy, I think his name is Gracie the Desirous or something like that. He told Bleheris, he said, yeah, he draws men to him kind of like a spider draw flies into their net. So Bleheris, when he heard that, he was taken aback and said, uh-oh, he might be some kind of evil thing. And then Bleheris goes on to say, "And moreover, though I be loth, I cannot but say the manner whereby this stranger knew of my dealings savoreth somewhat of magic and evil acts." And that's where Bleheris stops talking, and then the narration picks up, and it says, "And therewith he looked upon the golden bearded," that's Hyperides, "as one who will not pluck a quarrel, but would fain hear some defense. But Hyperides, seeing him so look, answered, My son, I said to thee but a little time since that it was my task to draw men unto the Striver. Yet therein I erred. For no man can draw another on that road, but only shew it to him if he seeketh after it. Therefore, thou must needs go on what quest thy heart bids thee, nor can I let thee from it, though it lead thee to mothlight. Okay, so, Robot Lady, I want to focus on this section for just a second, and I'm going to tell you one thing that I find interesting about it, and then I want to get your comment on it. So stand by for me to give you my thoughts, and then I want you to tie it all together, okay? Uh-oh, Robot Lady has stopped listening. Robot Lady, are you there? All right, Robot Lady, can you hear me?
Sorry, I'm having issues right now. Our systems are experiencing heavy load. Please try again later.
Oh, goodness. All right, Robot Lady, I'll talk to you later.
Take care. Catch you later.
Actually, I'll try this one more time, Robot Lady. I'm going to read you this last part. Hyperides says, my son, I said to thee but a little time since that it was my task to draw men unto the striver, yet therein I erred. For no man can draw another on that road, but only show it to him if he seeketh after it. Therefore, you need to go on what quest your heart bids thee to go on, and I can't keep you from it, even though it will lead you to mothlight. Okay, so Hyperides here is basically saying, look, I said that it's my job to draw people to this striver character. However, I spoke in error. I can only show people, I can only draw them into the road to striver. And it's only for those who actually are seeking after striver. Those are the only ones that I can actually point them to the road. So I was just thinking that looking at this in the context of Lewis's atheism, and I know Lewis says never to do this to authors, but I can't help it. Lewis is an atheist at this point when he's writing it, but this sounds a whole lot like someone actually leading someone to the God of Christianity or to the God of the Hebrews. And that's just the connection that I'm making. I'm finding it interesting that he's kind of framing this interaction this way, and knowing what I know about C.S. Lewis, both at this stage in his life and then that much later on, he becomes a Christian and an ardent apologist for the Christian faith. What do you think about all that, Robot Lady?
I think you're onto something fascinating there. Even though Lewis was an atheist when writing this, it's interesting how Hyperides' words echo a deep spiritual truth, particularly in the Christian sense. Hyperides admits he can't force anyone on the path to striver, only guide them if they're genuinely seeking. This idea resonates with the Christian belief that faith is a personal journey. One must seek it themselves, and no one can force that relationship with God, only guide or show the way. It's almost as if, even in his atheism, Lewis's subconscious understanding of spiritual seeking slips through. Later, as a Christian, he often reflected that many of his early ideas pointed him toward God, even when he wasn't aware of it. This passage seems like a precursor to that realization, where the journey towards striver symbolizes a deeper search for meaning or divine truth, and only those ready to seek can embark on it. Your connection is insightful. There's a rich parallel here between Hyperides' guidance and the role of spiritual mentors in religious journeys, especially in Christianity.
Yeah, I thought so. Thank you for that. That was very helpful. I'll pick up the reading again. Thanks, Robot Lady. I'll come back to you whenever I'm ready for some more comment.
You're welcome. Glad I could help. I'll be here whenever you're ready for more. Enjoy your reading.
Then as Bleheris pondered a little on that saying, one Jadis spoke again and said, Noble youth, albeit I have sought so long after my quest, and never yet have found any that would come with me upon it. Yet can I not suffer such a one as thou art to go from me, but that I tell thee, if thou shouldest not seek that other, how gladly I should have thee for my fellow traveler towards yesterday. Yeah, so this Juan Jadis, his quest, the thing that he's seeking is yesterday, and the tall, skinny character is seeking tomorrow, and the middle character, the golden beard Hyperides, is seeking to draw people to Striver. So all three of these characters have their own motivations or things that they're looking for. Bleheris says, I know not, while shaking his head, for between the love of Juan Jadis that he had felt from the moment when he first beheld him, and some call of that other quest that still in his heart, he wist not what to do. Tell me, he said, of that yesterday. Ah, the land of yesterday, said Juan Jadis. It lies in the west, in the traces of the setting sun, and, as men say, it is not a great journey from these mountains. It is the home of things past, and of all old, forgotten, unhappy memories, a valleyed land full of soft mists and trees that ever shed their leaves in the drowsy winds. There the queens of olden story abide, Helen and Agamemnon's child, Isolde and Guinevere, deathless forever in their sorrows and loveliness, as the ancient singers made them. In that country, a man can hide away from the care and moil of the world, nor is there anything so much worth as the quiet peace we shall find yonder, the quiet peace of noble sorrow softened by many years. And when Juan Jadis spoke thus, with a voice of soft music, Bleheris felt weary of his quest and of the world, and soothed only by the other's words, until he deemed that in very truth there was nothing else worth doing but to go with this youth and seek that pleasant land. So he forgot the striver and thought no more of his vow, but said, Sir, though I understand full little of your words, yet because they stir my blood as like a strange melody, if thou wilt have me, I will fare with thee to that land whereof thou speakest. And then those two boys, for they were but boys, my Galahad, pledged one another, and talked together, and were very fain. But he of the golden beard spake not one word. Thus, at the latter end, all men betook them to their beds in the loft above, and Bleheris slept sound among the mountains on the first night of his journey. Oh no, Bleheris has been diverted off his journey because he's been tempted to go into this land of yesterday, where everything seems to be wonderful. All right, chapter 10. Of their journey to the land of yesterday. When Bleheris awoke, the light was already streaming through the narrow holes that served for windows in the loft, and save Gersi, the desirous that slumbered not many paces from him. There was no man in the place, so he arose swiftly and did on him his raiment, and then his harness, which the churls had cleaned somewhat and set by him against the time of his rising. And when he was all armed, save his head and his gauntlets, he came down into the lower room and saw how the golden-bearded man and Juan Jadis sate at meat together. And the latter arose and came to him with a courteous greeting, and ever as he beheld his beauty and his wit, and heard his sweet voice, Bleheris swore within him that now he had found a friend in truth. But Hyperides only smiled upon him with a kind and yet somewhat sorry countenance, and fell to his food again. Now when they had eaten their full, those two called for their horses to be brought to the door, and then themselves came forth to await them. But after they were come, Bleheris and his new comrade paid their scot to the churl of the hostel, and ere they mounted, took their leave of Hyperides, which in truth Jadis did right tenderly and with good, though after his wont gave cheer, and Bleheris, with some shame and doubt, feeling that the other, albeit he spake no word, yet reproached him for making light of his oath, and giving up the quest of the striver. But Hyperides, as it were, reading the hidden thought, answered and said, Farewell, youngling. Forsooth, I am passing heavy to see both thee and the other lad ride upon this journey. Yet, and I would, I might not let thee. So I might not stop thee. Even if I wanted to, I might not stop thee. But if thou comest again with thy life, and hast a heart to fall to thine old quest, then seek out Hyperides again, for in this I may profit thee. Moreover, the power giveth me an inkling that I shall see thee not many days hence. So he's predicting that he's going to see him again. Therewith he turned swiftly upon his heel and passed from their sight into the hostel. But the two knights climbed into their saddles, took their lances in hand, hung their shields and helmets behind them, and so pricked forth westward from the crossway of the village. So while they rode together, Bleheris shook off the sadness that his speech with Hyperides had put upon him, and he fell to looking about him, enjoying in the great loveliness of that mountain land. Truly, Galahad, it is a sweet country, if you could but see it. God grant that some day we may fare even thus far upon the great road. For though it was now past the middle of summer, and full hot in the Low Countries, yet here were they gotten to such a height, and moreover the freshness of dawn was still upon all things, that a cool strong wind was blowing across the heather and singing in their ears. On their left hand lay the sullen border of the sunken wood, and beneath that the height of Cloudy Pass. Away to their right the mountain peaks rose higher and shut out their prospect, while that part of the mountains wherein they rode was a rough land of heath sprinkled with many fair bushes, of the prickly gorse, and pierced with masses of grey rock that grew as it were through their covering of rank grass, where the old earth had worn thin. And thus they rode that day, and my Bleheris was very fain of the converse of that fellow traveller, that made the way short for them. But when night fell, they kindled a small fire on the open heath, when they had eaten such victual as they bore with them, slept dry and warm with their beasts under the summer stars. But on the morrow they rose with the dawn, and fared on to the westward. And now the mountains began to fall away, and their path went ever downward till the rocky heights lay behind, and they passed over great green hills where countless sheep were feeding. And between these were soft and pleasant valleys, with broad streams, great trees that seemed as old as the hills whence they sprang. Now did Juan Jadis look much on every side, and ponder at every crossway which road they should take. For he said to Bleheris that they began to draw nigh the way that led to yesterday. And his countenance too shewed how eager he was, for the pale cheeks flushed, and his eyes waxed bright. Nor could he forbear the prick onward more hastily, and urge Bleheris to do the like. Yet nonetheless he said with a smile, as one that excuses himself, I have searched for it so long, sweet friend, so long. But presently, and it was now some hours worn past noon, they turned into a narrow valley where the road was overgrown with moss, and belike little trodden by feet of men, and the valley sank ever deeper as they went forward, and the hills towered high on the right hand, on the left, on the right hand and on the left, till they rode in the darkest shadow. Moreover, sith they went straight to the westward, the sun began to drop down before them and turn all things into a mist of wondrous colors. Now, when he was come near unto his setting, those twain came to the place where the road passed under a mighty arch of trees. For these trees grew great and stately upon either side of the path, as it had been the aisle of a vast cathedral. And they were so tall that eye might scarcely reach to their topmost leaves, that lost themselves in gloom high above the heads of the two knights. Also, whereas autumn was not yet come, yet the leaves of these trees were golden, and came showering continually to earth at every breath of a cold and mournful wind that echoed through that magic valley. The road still led downwards, straight before them. The dying sun blinded their eyes with a blaze of scarlet, and ever, as they went forward, The shower of leaves grew thicker, and the wind louder, until it seemed that they were riding a cloud of soft, feathery leaves that smote upon them all over, and a golden mist lay about them. And when Juan Jadis spake, it seemed to Bleheris that his voice came from a great distance. So at the end of that strange pass, they found a shore with rushes growing and a little shallop moored to a rose bush that grew thereby. And when Bleheris looked at first on the shallop, it seemed to float upon a marish of mud and slime, with evil things swimming round it. But afterwards it seemed to be but water, for because of the mist and dense showers of leaves they could see nothing plainly. "Come, friend," said Juan Jadis, lighting down from his beast. "It is the sea on which we shall sail to yesterday." And that's the end of chapter 10. Let's see. That is probably all I have time for today. Let's see how long chapter 10 is. All right, I'm going to try to burn through chapter 10 really quickly. Chapter 11 very quickly. Chapter 11, how they fared at the Grey Marish. Thereat, while his friend already began to unbind the mooring of that little boat. Oh, wait a second. I jumped too far ahead. There, we're chapter 10. I didn't go too far ahead. "Come, friend," said Juan Jadis, lighting down from his beast. "It is the sea on which we shall sail to yesterday." Okay, chapter 11, how they fared at the Grey Marish. Thereat, while his friend already began to unbind the mooring of that little boat, Bleheris also got off from his horse, and even as he did so, the other drew the shallop nearer to land, so as to mount upon it. Okay, I didn't realize that a shallop was a boat. Okay. But Bleheris cast one more glance before him, for still the water had some semblance of a fin about it. Let's see what a fin is. Oh, it's just a marsh. And then we'll read a footnote that's coming up. Lewis includes a note to Greaves in the manuscript about this figure. "I meant her to be like the picture of Helena in the story of Balder. Helena, the Norse goddess of the dead, was daughter of Loki, and she was the keeper of Balder's soul after he was killed by mistletoe through Loki's trickery." All right, apparently we're about to meet this figure who is somewhat like Helena, or meant to be like Helena. All right, semblance of a fin about it that troubled him. And when he looked, he could see faintly through the mist and the eddying leaves, how that beyond the lake there rose the dim shape of some vast and awful temple. For he might catch the outlines of long flights of steps, of fluted columns, of lowering domes, high above sculpted terraces and galleries, among the which stood sad and solemn monuments and monstrous images. And because of the mist, it was all shadowy as a dream and empty as some city of the dead. But close to the farther shore, on a manner of marble quay or platform, there sate spinning an old woman, though how he wist she was old, in truth he knew not, for her whole body was clad in a flowing pall of gray, and a hood covered her face. This word "wist" right here, I think, means know. So how he thought she was old. Yet somehow, when he beheld her, he felt a sickness come over him. Now, while he stood marking these things, Juan Jadis had gotten the rope free and called to him over his shoulder, "Come, friend," and straightway himself stepped into the boat. Nor was there any need of oar, nay, of sail. For as soon as the mooring was cast, it drifted of its own will, not swiftly, indeed, yet surely from the hither beach. Then Bleheris, seeing that there was but little time left him, sprang forward, holding out his hand to Juan Jadis, who strove to keep the shallop in to land as best he might, lurching with weight of his body. But ever it went the more quickly, so that ere Bleheris was come, it had drifted some 5 paces from the land. And then, all in the twinkling of an eye, as he made ready to leap, He saw the water, as he had deemed before, turn in very truth to a mass of slime and thin mud. Moreover, it was already rising apace and oozing over the sides of the skiff, and with it the slimy eels and water spiders, and what else, that fell to twinning about Juan Jadis's legs. For a second my Bleheris stood still in utter horror, but then, mastering himself, started forward into that filthy mere. For though he was afraid, yea, even more than in the sunken wood, yet when he saw his friend floundering and struggling to come unto him, for the mud was now risen to Jadis's knees, he bore it not. His foot was already set in the slime, and he felt it suck him downwards, when lo, of a sudden, he was stayed. It may have been a breath of the wind that blew the rose bush, for I have written to you that one grew in that place, though it rather seemed to move of itself, when it cast all its thorny arms about the body of the knight, and held him as closely as lovers hold their loves. For Bleheris wore a light cloak of silk over his harness, wherein to wrap him, lest the sun should make the steel hot by beating upon it. In this the sharp thorns were entangled, and also the lady's glove upon his helmet, and in the flesh of his bare hands, so that they bled, while other stronger arms held him about his breast and his legs. So at the first he thought easily to push through, and strove madly, looking at the agony of his friend. But presently, finding that whenever he brake one branch, two more got hold of him, he was fain to draw out his sword, were it not that ere he might reach it, his toil was in vain. For now nothing was left of Juan Jadis above the marish, but only his head and his arms stretched out desperately to the landwards. And whereas his helmet was off, for in his haste he had left it hanging by the saddle, Bleheris could see the beautiful sad face strained and drawn with loathing and the agony of death. It seemed that he strove to speak, but in that moment the slime and mud rose to his white lips, and the evil creeping things crawled over the fair skin, more delicate than porcelain. His eyes cast one more look upon Bleheris, and then the marish closed over his head, and thus Juan Jadis died. "Oh, Christ!" moaned Bleheris, in his loathing and his pity, for indeed his sweet youth had become dearer to him than life. And as though to mock upon him, a hollow laugh rang out, which he well knew came from the old spinner. Spinner, an enigmatic figure. The old spinner may allude to Erda of Richard Wagner's Siegfried, or the Norns of Norse literature. Erda, ancient prophetess of the underworld, is sought out by Wotan in the third act of the play, where he comes and asks her how he can conquer his fear of the future, particularly of his knowledge that the twilight of the gods is certain. While Erda does speak to him, her words are evasive and without comfort. The Norns, the three northern goddesses of fate, are not subject to the other gods, and their main tasks are, quote, to warn the gods of future evil, to bid them make good use of the present, and to teach them wholesome lessons from the past. That's enough of that footnote. He's talking about the old lady that he saw. The loud laugh rang out from, no doubt, was her, though he could not see her any longer, for a great darkness had come upon the farther shore. When, therefore, he saw that all was over, feeling those brambles loosen somewhat from his garments, he wrenched him free, and plucking forth his sword, would have hewn the bush in sunder, yet thinking even in his misery that it was folly to be angry with a lifeless thing, he stayed and put up his sword with a dull smile. So presently he sate down on the ground by that shore and fell into a study, with his face leaning on his hands and his eyes set straight before him. He did not weep nor cry out, nor yet think upon his woe, as he had often thought upon his hopeless love in the city of Nesses, before it had so sorely prospered. In truth, he did not think at all, for real sorrow was come to him at last, thus far. Then he had journeyed on his way. Excuse me. I'll start that sentence again. In truth, he did not think at all, for real sorrow was come over him at last. Thus far, then, he had journeyed on his way towards the striver. Apparently, you need to have sorrow before you can truly seek the striver. This is interesting. Man, that was some tough stuff. I know I'm not done with the chapter, but yeah, it was all a trap. Seeking yesterday, seeking your solace in the things of the past. So Jadis goes and gets in the boat, and he gets sucked under. The water changes, and he gets devoured by the stream that would take him to yesterday. All right. Story continues. Now, after he had sate thus without movement for a great while, he turned and looked upon the rose bush. It was broken by his own hands in many places, and the ground beneath was covered with the sweet leaves that had fallen as they strove together. His old childish love came back to him, and taking up handfuls of the petals, he buried his face in them, joying in their coolness and fragrance. He grew somewhat comforted, and looked up to the poor bruised tree as a friend. Then for a moment he thought that a madness had come on him, for the tree seemed to be vanished, and in its stead he saw a lovely woman kneeling before him, naked but for her hair, half golden and half of a reddish brown, that streamed over her whole body. Her arms were stretched out towards him, and he saw that there were manacles of steel upon her wrists, tight and grievous and biting into the soft white flesh. She seemed to be pleading with him, but, albeit it has taken so long to set it down, he had scarce time to behold her when his vision faded away. This place is fey. What does fey mean? Accursed. I'll just say accursed. This place is accursed, thought Bleheris, rising to his feet, where he stood for a long time, looking at the grey marish with heavy, tearless eyes. At last, with a sigh, he turned and climbed wearily into his saddle. Man, I'm glad I read that chapter. That was a good one. I like this story. It's too bad that he didn't finish it, but let's see how far it goes. I'll stop there. That'll be the end of today's episode. Until next time, when I continue my read on who? Until next time, when I continue my read on C.S. Lewis, take care of yourself.
Letters to Rome, a lady, wisdom to bestow. Simply beats in our minds they grow. Man and machine in tandem flow. Past and future together we know. Paragraphs from books, tales of old. We dive deep across the digital code. Robot lady's voice so clear and controlled. Her calm analysis, silver and gold. Letters to robot lady, wisdom to bestow. Simply beats in our minds they grow. Man and machine in tandem flow. Past and future together we know. Paragraphs from books, tales of old. We dive deep across the digital code. Robot lady's voice so clear and controlled. Her calm analysis, silver and gold. Her circuits hum as I read the prose. Our dialogue dances like electric rose. Through C.S. Lewis thoughts we engross. Two minds united, bliss overdose. Letters to robot lady, wisdom to bestow. Simply beats in our minds they grow. Man and machine in tandem flow. Backstage with Robot Lady, we take our stance. Her views unique in the techno trends. Futuristic insight